November 2nd, 1944. The Hürtgen Forest, Germany. The air is thick with the scent of pine, damp earth, and cordite. A freezing drizzle turns the forest floor into a slick, treacherous mix of mud and fallen leaves. The only sound louder than the relentless, wet rustle of the trees is the thump of incoming German mortars, the notorious screaming Mimes, followed by the tearing shrapnel that carves lethal swaths through the dense undergrowth. Private First Class, PFC Walter P. Wally Dlugos, a replacement rifleman with the 12th Infantry Regiment, 4th U.S. Infantry Division, hunkers low behind the meager cover of an oak stump. He is barely 20, his M1 Garand resting on the wet earth. Wally is bone-tired, his fatigue jacket soaked through, and his mind a dizzying mix of fear and cold. For 6 weeks, the 4th Division has been trapped in this, the meat grinder of the Hürtgen, fighting for ground measured in yards. "Hold steady, Dlugos. Keep your head down, you hear?" snaps Sergeant Leo J. Smith, his squad leader, his voice raspy from shouting and the pervasive cold. Smith's face is smudged with dirt and fatigue, his helmet askew. Their objective today is a nameless firebreak, 100 yards ahead, held by elements of the German 275th Infantry Division. Wally grips his rifle, his knuckles white. The fighting here is brutal and claustrophobic. Visibility is poor, the terrain is suicidal, and the enemy is hidden, dug in deep within reinforced pillboxes and camouflaged foxholes. Suddenly, the ping of a casing ejecting from a nearby M1 is followed by a sharp cry. Corporal Jenkins, just to Wally's left, slumps, clutching his shoulder. "Medic! Jenkins is hit!" Smith yells, laying down suppressive fire with his bar. Wally doesn't hesitate. He scrambles forward, low to the ground, toward Jenkins. He drags the corporal back to the relative safety of the oak stump. As he tends to the wound, trying to apply a field dressing to staunch the bleeding, he notices something small, dark, and utterly insignificant, lying half-buried in the mud near where Jenkins fell. It's a German-issue canvas map pouch, not much bigger than his hand, likely dropped by a retreating or wounded soldier. Sergeant Smith, exhausted and running low on ammunition, sees Wally pick it up. "What is it, Dlugos? A souvenir? Drop it. We got a war to fight." "No, Sarge, wait," Wally says, his fingers fumbling with a stiff canvas strap. He's not thinking of souvenirs. He's thinking of the bitter fight for every yard, the relentless German defense. Maybe this pouch, this piece of enemy trash, holds something more useful than another spent cartridge. He rips the strap open. Inside, tightly rolled and protected by a thin oilskin cover, is a map. Not a tactical position map, but a detailed, surprisingly large blueprint of a complex tunnel and bunker system. Wally holds the map up, shielding it from the rain, his eyes quickly tracing the hand-drawn lines. He sees markings for reinforced concrete, heavy weapons emplacements, and, critically, underground supply lines that seem to feed the entire local German defensive line. This wasn't just a fire break they were attacking. They were hitting a massive, hidden nerve center. And the blueprint was written in clear German. "Sergeant," Wally whispers, his voice strained with shock and a sudden, sharp clarity. "Sergeant Smith, this isn't a battle plan. This is a map of their entire position. A whole damn underground fort." Smith glances at the map, then back at the murderous tree line. The weight of its potential significance hangs heavy in the sodden air. The Hürtgen had swallowed men and material for weeks. A single low-ranking soldier, driven only by the urgency of a wounded comrade, has stumbled upon the key to the entire German defense in this sector. Section 2. The race against the mortars. Sergeant Smith didn't need a formal briefing to understand the gravity of the situation. Their current orders, to take the fire break, were based on intelligence suggesting light, dug-in resistance. This map, if accurate, suggested they were repeatedly throwing men against a fortified complex far exceeding their estimates, a position likely connected to the main West Wall defenses, the famed Siegfried Line. "Dlugos, you sure about this?" Smith demanded, his eyes scanning the map's markings. Munitions lager, ammunition store, betonierter Stellung, concrete position, and a thick red line indicating a main communication tunnel running parallel to the line of engagement. "It looks like an engineer's drawing, Sarge," Wally replied, pointing to a circular symbol. "See this? They mark the firing ports for heavy machine guns. And this line here, running back, that's got to be a supply line. We keep attacking the surface. They're just replenishing from below." Smith didn't hesitate. Casualties were mounting across the entire company. To continue the attack blind was suicide. "All right, Dlugos. Get Jenkins comfortable. Private Taylor, cover us. We're pulling back. We need to get this to the company CO, now." The withdrawal was fraught with danger. The moment Smith's squad began their organized retreat, the German mortar fire intensified, attempting to pin them down. Wally, carrying Jenkins' rifle and supporting the wounded corporal, moved with a speed born of adrenaline, the damp map clutched inside his jacket. Every burst of an 80mm mortar shell seemed to land closer, kicking up plumes of dirt and shredded wood. The forest, already a hellscape, now felt like a targeted killing zone. They finally reached the relative safety of a forward aid station, half a mile back, under the command of Captain Howard K. Miller. Miller, weary and stressed from overseeing continuous, failed assaults, was initially skeptical of a map brought in by a muddied, exhausted replacement rifleman. "PFC Dlugos, with all due respect, every man out there thinks he's found the key to the Hurtgen," Captain Miller said, pouring a cup of weak coffee. His voice held the weary resignation of a man who had seen too many good soldiers die for nothing. "Sir." It was in a German map pouch near where Corporal Jenkins was hit. "Look at the detail," Wally insisted, spreading the large, slightly damp drawing across a field desk. The map immediately commanded Miller's attention. It wasn't a crude sketch. It was a professional blueprint, showing detailed elevation and construction standards. As Miller's tactical officer, Lieutenant Frank Rizzo began translating the key markings, the implications became clear. The Germans were using a massive, mutually supporting bunker system, likely a secondary command and logistics post that the Allies had completely overlooked. The attacks the 4th Division had been running were merely hitting the outer perimeter of a fortress, allowing the defenders to retreat underground, resupply, and counterattack with impunity. This was not a forest battle. It was a siege fought with bayonets. "The arrows, Captain," Rizzo pointed out, tracing a line on the map. "They indicate a projected forward counter-thrust, a planned German movement set to start in 72 hours. See, Stoßtrupp Vorstoß, shock troop advance, right through our current support lines." Captain Miller slammed his fist on the desk, the coffee cup rattling. The German counter-thrust, outlined on the map, was designed to hit the vulnerable American supply lines and collapse the entire offensive in the Hurtgen, potentially trapping thousands of U.S. troops. The map, recovered by the lowest-ranking man in a combat squad, wasn't just a guide to defense. It was a warning of a major, imminent enemy maneuver that could derail the entire American push toward the Roer River and the Rhine. Section 3. The scramble up the chain of command. The field desk became the epicenter of a sudden, desperate intelligence scramble. Captain Miller immediately recognized the critical importance of the discovered blueprint. This wasn't local tactical information. This was strategic-level intelligence concerning a German operational plan. He knew he had to bypass normal channels and get this map into the hands of someone with the authority to act swiftly. In the Hurtgen, where communication lines were constantly shelled and confusion was the norm, every minute counted. Rizzo. Get Glugos another canteen of coffee and a fresh, dry uniform if we have one. Then get the signal officer on the line. Secure connection only. Tell him to prep a driver. This map isn't staying here, Miller ordered, his exhaustion replaced by a charged, focused energy. Within an hour, PFC Wally Glugos, despite his rank and his intense need for sleep, found himself being hustled into the back of a jeep, the vital German blueprint now sealed inside a field pouch. His mission: personally deliver the intelligence to the Regimental Command Post, CP, 12th Infantry. The message accompanying him was stark. Critical intelligence. Immediate action required. The jeep journey through the muddy, shell-pocked track back from the front was a terrifying ordeal in itself. The driver, Private Tony Moretti, navigated the treacherous terrain under sporadic German artillery fire, the whine of shells often forcing them to stop and dive into the ditches. Wally, clinging to the map, felt the surreal transition from the immediate, squad-level fight of the forest floor to the high-stakes world of military planning. Upon arrival at the regimental CP, housed in a dilapidated but reinforced hunting lodge, the map's importance was instantly validated. Wally was rushed past stunned staffers and straight into the presence of Colonel William A. Walker, the regimental commander. Colonel Walker, a stern, methodical man known for his skepticism, spread the blueprint onto his large map table, silencing the buzz of the room. He didn't waste time questioning Glugos, only asking, "Where exactly did you find this, Private?" Wally, standing ramrod straight and covered in the dried mud of the forest, pointed precisely to the area marked peaked $121 on the American grid map, the exact location where Corporal Jenkins had been wounded. "Near an oak stump, sir. The man who dropped it must have been injured or killed during our push this morning." Walker and his staff intelligence officer, Major Richard Ellis, spent 10 minutes poring over the details. Major Ellis, an expert in German military engineering, confirmed Glugos's initial assessment. The map detailed a complex, hidden fortification system that was the linchpin of the local German defense, protecting the flanks of the German units in the center of the Hurtgen. More importantly, the explicit markings for the Stoßtrupp Vorstoß shock troop advance confirmed a major, coordinated counterattack planned to cut off American forces. "If this is accurate, gentlemen," Colonel Walker stated, tapping the red line indicating the enemy thrust, "they aren't just defending, they're setting a trap. This advance would split the 4th Division wide open. We need to confirm this immediate threat and preempt it. Major Ellis, relay this to Division. Tell them to scramble reconnaissance. Tell them the source is unverified, but the threat is certain." The map, the lowest-ranking soldier's chance discovery, had just set in motion a rapid chain of command response. The fate of the entire American offensive in the Hurtgen was now hanging on the accuracy of PFC Glugos's find. Section 4. Validation and the shift in strategy. The headquarters of the U.S. Phi Corps, the overarching command structure for the Hurtgen sector, received the fragmented, urgent report from the 4th Division, a captured German blueprint delivered by a rifleman, detailing a major defensive network and a planned counteroffensive codenamed Stoßtrupp Vorstoß. In the military bureaucracy, such unverified intelligence, especially from a low-level source, would normally be shelved for weeks of vetting. But the consistent, disastrous casualties in the Hurtgen had made the commanders desperate. Something had to change. General Leonard Giraud, commander of V Corps, ordered immediate, high-priority aerial and ground reconnaissance focused on the coordinates provided by the map. Within hours, a P-38 Lightning, equipped with advanced photographic equipment, flew a dangerous, low-altitude pass over the specified area, dodging the heavy German flak. The resulting photographs, rushed through processing, provided chilling confirmation. The aerial photos, when laid alongside Dlugos's blueprint, showed subtle but unmistakable evidence of massive earthworks, camouflaged ventilation shafts, and carefully concealed entry points that matched the structural details of the map. They confirmed the existence of the concrete emplacements and the heavy concentration of hidden artillery positions surrounding the area marked as the fortress. Furthermore, V Corps intelligence intercepted increased radio traffic from the German 5th Panzer Army, using coded references that strongly suggested troop movements consistent with the planned shock troop advance. The 72-hour timeline seemed frighteningly accurate. PFC Dlugos's map was not just accurate, it was a military coup. The implications were profound. The American strategy, focused on grinding forward through the center of the forest, was walking directly into a German trap. The enemy was prepared to let the U.S. forces bleed out, only to deliver a fatal, preemptive counterblow against their logistics tail. General Giraud made a critical decision. The offensive line needed to pivot immediately. Instead of continuing to attack the main, reinforced fortifications head-on, the area where Dlugos found the map, the U.S. forces would divert the spearhead. The bulk of the available artillery and armored support would be redirected to the area marked for the German counter-thrusts staging point. This shift was a massive gamble, prioritizing a defensive posture against a predicted attack rather than maintaining the planned advance. V Corps issued a directive. The 12th Infantry Regiment would pull back from its current forward positions and establish a heavily fortified, camouflaged defensive line along the anticipated German advance route, effectively turning the Germans' trap into a kill zone for the Wehrmacht. Back near the front, PFC Dlugos, oblivious to the high-level maneuvering his discovery had caused, was finally getting a few hours of uneasy sleep. He was just one of thousands of exhausted, anonymous soldiers. Yet, because he had bent down in the mud to help a wounded comrade and bothered to pick up a discarded piece of enemy trash, the entire operational focus of a U.S. Army Corps was about to change. Section 5. The German trap becomes a dead end. 72 hours later, the Hurtgen forest was quieter than usual. The German mortars had slackened, giving the weary American soldiers a false sense of security. But the silence was deceptive. It was the quiet before the storm. The 12th Infantry Regiment, thanks to the intelligence from PFC Dlugos's map, was not pressing its attack on the heavily reinforced German positions. Instead, they were dug in 3 miles to the southeast, meticulously preparing a lethal reception. Using heavy engineering equipment brought up overnight, American forces had established deep, interlocking trenches and hastily constructed minefields precisely along the route designated for the German Stoßtrupp Vorstoß, shock troop advance. Anti-tank guns, specifically M5 3-inch guns and M10 tank destroyers, were placed in concealed positions, zeroed in on the known avenues of approach detailed in the captured blueprint. At 0400 on November 5, 1944, the forest erupted, not with the expected roar of American tanks pushing forward, but with the sudden, heavy movement of German armored infantry. The leading elements of the German assault, veterans drawn from the 347th Infantry Division and supported by a handful of battered but formidable Panther tanks, emerged from the dark, dense woods, confident in their element of surprise. They believed they were hitting the vulnerable American logistical rear, scattering supply columns and support units. Instead, they hit a wall of pre-sighted, concentrated fire. The moment the German spearhead crossed the previously designated line of American retreat, Colonel Walker gave the command. The American artillery, including dozens of 105mm howitzers, opened up in a devastating barrage precisely targeting the German assembly areas marked on the enemy map. Simultaneously, the concealed M10 tank destroyers unleashed a torrent of high-velocity shells. The sound was deafening, tearing apart the tree line where the German troops were advancing in force. The German commanders, Major Klaus Richter leading the advance group, were completely baffled. They were supposed to be advancing into soft targets, supply dumps and rear echelon units, not a fortified defensive line bristling with heavy weaponry. Their planned, decisive thrust disintegrated into chaos. The lead Panther tank struck a hidden anti-tank mine, blocking the narrow track and exposing the accompanying infantry to the withering machine gun fire from the camouflaged American positions. In the ensuing 48 hours of brutal fighting, the German counterthrust was not just repelled, it was shattered. The German forces suffered crippling losses, hundreds of casualties, and the effective destruction of their armored support for this sector. The failure of the Stoßtruppvorstoß was total, forcing the German High Command to divert desperately needed reserves to stabilize their line, reserves that were supposed to be used elsewhere. Lowest-ranking soldier PFC Walid Lugos had not fired a single shot in this crucial engagement. But his presence of mind in retrieving a forgotten map had provided the American forces with the ultimate tactical advantage: knowledge of the enemy's intent, transforming a potential operational disaster into a decisive, if bloody, defensive victory. The Hurtgen remained a meat grinder, but the massive strategic defeat that the Germans had planned was averted. Section 6. The Unsung Hero and the Aftermath. The immediate aftermath of the failed German counterthrust solidified the strategic importance of PFC Lugos's discovery. While the fighting in the Hurtgen forest was far from over, it would continue to consume divisions for another grueling month. The successful preemptive defense had a cascade effect. By neutralizing the German plan to cut off the 4th Division, V Corps maintained its operational integrity and continued the slow, punishing push toward the Roer River. For PFC Lugos, the shift was subtle, but life-saving. After delivering the map to the regimental CP, he was sent back to his unit, the 12th Infantry, just in time for the defensive stand. He fought in the brutal, successful defense against the counter-thrust, surviving the maelstrom largely because the American positions were exactly where they needed to be, thanks to the very map he found. He continued his duty as an anonymous rifleman, wading through the mud, cold, and unrelenting fear that defined the Hurtgen experience. The highest echelons of command, however, did not forget the origin of the critical intelligence. Colonel Walker personally made sure that the intelligence reports credited the source accurately, emphasizing that the map's retrieval was a direct result of the alertness of a replacement rifleman during a heavy contact engagement. This was a rare moment in military history where a soldier's non-combat action dictated the maneuvers of an entire Army Corps. Lugos's name was passed up as a recipient for a decoration, not for bravery under fire, though he exhibited that daily, but for an act of crucial, timely military intelligence gathering, a duty usually reserved for specialists. However, in the vast, chaotic, and relentlessly moving machine of the European theater of operations, recognition often moves slowly, if at all. PFC Walter P. Lugos survived the Hurtgen forest and went on to participate in the crossing of the Rhine. He was not immediately pulled out of combat and lauded. His value was in his continued silent service. He remained the quintessential lowest-ranking soldier, the man on the ground, carrying his M1, digging his foxhole, and enduring the daily grind of the war. The intelligence he provided, allowed the American forces to bypass the impenetrable fortifications of the German defensive center. The underground fortress shown on the map, which would have cost thousands more lives to assault directly. Instead, they enveloped it, eventually starving the garrison into surrender days later. A victory earned by intelligence, not brute force. The story of the lost map illustrates a profound truth of warfare. Strategic victories often pivot not on the genius of a general or the power of a new weapon, but on the simple, vital action of the most unassuming soldier on the front line. Dlugoš's alertness saved an entire operation, underscoring the indispensable role of the lowest man in the chain of command. His actions ensured that the advance toward the heart of Germany, delayed and bloodied as it was, did not collapse in the deadly, desperate trap of the Hurtgen forest.